which is Intro to Prompt Engineering. So we'll be able to apply some of these techniques. Afterwards, evaluation with AI workflow. So how do you do evaluation? What is evaluation, and how do you run it with kind of one of our technologies, which is an AI workflow? And then we have an evaluation exercise. Afterwards, we'll take a quick break, 5-minute break, and then we'll get started again at productionization, which is I've tested a lot of things out. I need to get into prod with my ML use case or generative AI use case. How do I do that? Productionization with AI workflows, which is more of like a batch inference type style where I'm able to run it at scale on a certain schedule or run it on n number of rows. Then we have an exercise with AI workflows, then a productionization with AI config. We have use cases afterwards, different modalities, so voice, audio, image. And then we're going to go into an open discussion. I also have some backup slides on semantic retrieval, which dives really deep into semantic retrieval for people who are interested. But we'll see how much we can get through. I'll try to chug along. Once again, this is pretty interactive. So if you have any questions, just feel free to put a question in the chat, and Elaine's going to be helping out, just moderating it. And I'll take pauses here and there to answer the questions to make it more interactive. Cool. We'll make this virtual session as if we're all in the same, room together. Okay. So let's get started. First thing I like to talk about is LastMile AI. This is the company that I'm part of. LastMile AI is a developer platform tool for engineering teams. There you go. A quick summary about our company. So with the rise of generative AI, one thing that we've noticed is generative AI really is accessible and usable by everyone. Historically, a lot of the ML applications were focused on ML research scientists or ML engineers. With generative AI, it's become much more widely applicable, which means we can use it for everyday applications, and it's not limited to certain companies that have large enough ML engineering teams. And so we see more and more people are bringing generative AI to their companies and applying it to business practices. With that, there's kind of a rise of tooling for supporting these type of development. And that's where our company begins, where we've built these tools at companies like Facebook and Airbnb and Microsoft. And now we're trying to build it out for the world. And Google has been pretty inspired by our mission and what we've built. And so they're our primary investors. They're AI fund Gradient Ventures. And so this is kind of the mission of our company, and just wanted to establish it up front. A little bit about myself. I started off my career as a product manager. I joined a team that was just starting out building a distributed database. At the time, it was called Azure Document DB. We worked on it. We rebranded to something called Azure Cosmos DB, and we grew it out to one of the largest cloud databases in the world for NoSQL. And that was really exciting to see the merger of infrastructure and the power that infrastructure has, especially with unstructured data. Naturally, when you work with a lot of data, the next thing you become interested is with ML. That's when I joined Airbnb as a product lead for machine learning. That included their ML platform team, their applied ML team, and I created their first internal labeling team. Afterwards, I joined Meta, and I was a manager for a team of product managers that worked on Meta's ML platform. This was really quite unique because I've never joined a company where their ML infrastructure team or ML teams were so large. For those who don't know, Facebook creates PyTorch, the Llama models, and they have a significant ML investment. A lot of it is open source. And working with the team of managers there, or product managers there on the ML platform, was really quite an eye-opening experience to see what is it like to actually run ML at a scale like Facebook. And last but not least, currently what I'm representing today, LastMile AI. I'm a co-founder and CPO of LastMile AI. We're actually a team from Facebook where we all left together to build this generative AI platform. And we believe that there's going to be a next generation ML platform for generative AI. Hence this talk and a lot of the content of what does it actually mean to productionize. And we'll lean into a lot of the experience, what I've seen across the board for building these type of infrastructures at previous companies. So let's get started into the meat of the workshop, which is generative AI plus ML ops. I'm guessing most people here know what generative AI is, but a quick one-line snippet is it's a class of deep learning models that can generate typically high quality unstructured data such as text, images, videos, and audios. These are so remarkable because of the quality of the results it contains, as well as the creativity or somewhat creativity built from these generative AI models. They've really taken off. I think it started with ChatGPT really getting the world's attention, and now you have your Llama 2 models, you have your Claude models from Anthropic, and you have this wide suite of not just only large language models, but across different modalities coming out. So a brief history of LLMs. First, in 2010, it started off with your classic ML models. Obviously, it started before then. But in 2010, they're really just for specific NLP tasks. Very, very structured data, can't handle a wide variety of things. That's when you had your libraries of like Spacey and LTK, these type of things. Afterwards, there was a rise of RNNs for NLP. The advancements in GPU technologies made RNNs or sequential input much more practical, which led to a rise in these RNNs used for NLP. Afterwards, you have your LSTM, and LSTMs performed much better than the classic RNNs because they leverage memory much better. And then last but not least, the age that we're currently in is the transformer architecture. And the transformer architecture is really what really spun a lot of the innovation that's happening today. That happened in 2017. And the kind of monumental paper that came out from Google in 2017 was the attention is all you need paper. And that really spun out a wide ecosystem of these models coming out. They leverage these neural network architectures to get much higher quality results. So why do these transformer-based models perform so much better? One is parallelization, which means that you can actually use significantly more data to train these models. And the second is attention mechanism. The Google paper, attention is all you need, is very, very spot on in terms of what they found, which was having the increased attention from before and after for the context for making the predictions have been incredibly useful. One example here is the pizza came out of the oven and it tasted good. Obviously, from all of us, we know that we didn't taste the oven because that would be quite painful to eat. And it's referring to the pizza as a noun. And having an attention mechanism gives a much higher probability rate that it's the pizza as opposed to the oven. And it also goes back to retrieving the intention from previous sentence, as well as afterwards. And so generally performing much better, and the core architecture for a lot of the models that we'll work with today. Cool. Now we'll dive into ML Ops. For people who don't know much about ML Ops is basically operationalizing machine learning. This is something I focused a lot of time on at previous companies, and something that's near and dear to my heart, which is how do you get these ML models into production and what actually needs to be there? And so when you look at generative AI, you kind of start from the left-hand diagram of the foundation model, which is ChatGPT, GPT-4, GPT 2.5. You have your Llama 2 models. How do you actually get into a reliable use case? There's actually a number of steps that are taken, because as you're working through this production use case, you still need to go through traditional ML steps to make sure that it's robust enough to be in production. So this is a simplified view. I'll go into a much more detailed view afterwards, but at a high level, you have your prompt engineering, which is, what do I change as the input to my model? Afterwards, you do some type of data preparation and fine tuning if you need fine tuning, or you do some type of RAG style approach, which is retrieval augmented approach, or retrieval augmentation generation. Then you do kind of a rule-based engine to try to catch hallucinations or incorrect results, and then you have to integrate it into your business application. Last Mile is solely focused on this last mile problem, which is, we know that there's these extremely powerful models coming out of the industry. How do we make sure that we provide the right tooling suite so that people can comfortably get into production use cases? This is a much more detailed view of the ML ops problem. I'll talk about it step by step, and I'll spend a few minutes here because of how important it is, and it'll help string the narrative together as I go through each step and the tooling required, as well as what you can build throughout to make sure that you can actually go and build end-to-end applications with generative AI. So step number one is prompt engineering. People are generally pretty familiar with this. You specify the input for the model. You also specify the system prompt, or even like the negative prompt. One thing to know about prompt engineering, it can be much more systematic. Generally, when you're looking to do it for production use cases, you're going to employ a few techniques. Deep learning has an excellent course on prompt engineering. I actually took a lot of the deep learning content and put it into our workshop to make sure that you learn kind of how do you prompt engineer to make sure that you reduce hallucinations, that you get the results that you want, to make sure that you can either do chain of thought or instruction-led based prompts. And so prompt engineering is key, and there's a lot of focus there as of today. Next is your parameter tuning. Your parameter tuning is modifying different parameters associated with the model, whether that is temperature, whether that is tokens or whatsoever. And these help kind of fine tune the performance of the model you're working with. Then it goes into twofold, which is ad hoc evaluation and offline evaluation. Evaluation is a really tricky subject in the industry right now because there is no defined way of evaluating a model. And so one example is if you ask a large language model to say, write me a one pager about X, Y, and Z product, how do you actually grade the performance of it? It's really under contentious debate. Oftentimes, a lot of the model providers will run it against LSATs or different exams, but it turns out those exams aren't really indicative of the actual performance used in production. And so it's still up for debate and it's highly customizable, but there's really two forms of approaches outside of the evaluation function. The first one is ad hoc evaluation. That one is one-off. It's the one that typically you and I do most commonly, which is you run the prompt against the model and you kind of eyeball check, or you run your own evaluation to see, does it work or not? It's not at scale and it's not, doesn't cover a wide variety of use cases. It's more of a one-off check. Most of the businesses that we talked to today are still in this phase. A few businesses have gone into offline evaluation, which is I want to run in batch a full suite of evaluation. And the full suite of evaluation is a bunch of tests to run to see what the performance is like. It checks for edge cases and it makes sure that across thousands of rows that you can actually get the results that you need. Afterwards, you get into data preparation, which usually gets data from different plugins or connectors. Then you go into this retrieval augmentation or fine tuning. Retrieval augmentation is basically generating embeddings, putting that into a vector store, and then using a k-nearest neighbor to retrieve the results. And so at a high level, the way you think about that is if I have ChatGPT and I say, what's my schedule like for tomorrow? It can actually go and retrieve my calendar, get the calendar events that's scheduled on there for tomorrow's day, return that into the model, and then the model is able to format it and respond in a human-like response saying, hey, your day tomorrow is this one, X, Y, and Z. These are your important meetings, and these are ones that are conflicting, so you should figure out which one you're going to attend. Fine-tuning is a bit more exhaustive, where you're looking to train your own model or continue the training of an open source model or GPT 2.5 or a hosted model that provides it. It's a little bit more finicky. It promises much higher results at the end, but you need to get a lot of data to fine tune the model. And usually it's a much more expensive approach. Typically when talking to companies, fine tuning is the one that always starts off with, but given the cost restraints and the maintenance overhead, it usually goes back into more retrieval augmentation style. And retrieval augmentation has a much better approach towards reducing hallucinations. One also disclaimer to add is it doesn't mean you don't need to do both. So even with fine-tuning and fine-tuning model, you can still do a retrieval augmentation, but fine-tuning in general will be much more expensive and have overhead. Model deployment, which is how do you get your model and all the things that you've built before it into production and integrate it, which is step 7, into your business applications. And then last but not least, there's a suite of things to do at the very end, which is either a rule-based engine, a caching layer, and the audit logs. Your rule-based engine is around how do you prevent different hallucinations. Your caching layer is going to save a lot of the results so you don't need to recompute. For a lot of people who use, these LLMs, GPT-4 is generally pretty expensive. And so people are pretty cost conscious and they think about whether they should use Palm 2 or GPT 3.5 to save on costs. And so caching can really help there. And then audit logs. These models aren't perfect. Oftentimes the things that go most viral is how imperfect these models are. And so having an audit log is really helpful where you're able to label and feed that back into the data preparation process so that you can prevent these type of issues from happening in the future. Amazing. Okay. So the question that always comes up is, okay, who are the ML ops providers? What are the tools out there? The traditional predictive ML ops are, you've seen these names before, really recognizable. You have your SageMakers, your Vertex, your Rise, your Data Robot, Comet, Weights and Bias, Domino, H2O, all these companies. For generative AI ops, it's relatively new. No one has really established as the go-to. Some people are trying Llama Index, others are trying LangChain as libraries. For hosted services, I think a lot of these services are trying to add integration right now, but nothing has really been settled so far. And so it's kind of the Wild West right now for generative AI and who's going to provide the ops. And we're taking our own stance on it and seeing what we can do. Amazing. So we're going to start the first section, which has an exercise, which is prompting with AI workbooks. Before I dive in, any questions I need to answer? Check. Don't think so. Okay. Amazing. Okay, so we'll get started into the actual kind of workshop session where we'll be able to use a workbook and try out different prompting techniques. So for the next section, it's going to cover the first 3 parts of that ML lifecycle I went into depth on. And so it'll cover the prompt engineering, the parameter tuning, and the ad hoc evaluation. So for prompting, just quick vocabulary and aligning on the definitions. There's really 3 things to change in prompting. First is the model, whether it's GPT 3.5 Turbo, GPT-4, Palm 2, Palm Chat, Claude from Anthropic, or Llama. Deciding on what model you're going to use is quite important. In conjunction, what parameters for that model, deciding on what is top P, max tokens, temperature, and then last but not least is the actual prompt. These are all the things that you're tweaking and deciding in this phase as you're exploring to figure out what's the best combination of system prompt, input prompt, model, as well as parameters that yields the best results for your use case. Ad hoc evaluation is the one-off evaluation. This is just from the OpenAI one. So this one we're able to run through and evaluate quite easily, but the input can be Roger has 5 tennis balls, he buys 2 more cans of tennis balls, each can has 3 tennis balls. For all of us, we should be able to say that, oh, this is 11, because it's a little bit tricky because there's numbers in there and it's 2 cans with 3 tennis balls each, so it's 6, and then it's 11 total. Models will have a harder time figuring this out on the evaluation because it's a bit convoluted where the logic is the tennis balls, then the introduction of a new concept, which is the tennis ball cans, which have a certain amount of tennis balls in each, and then adding it all together. But if you ask it to explain its logic, it does quite well, which is, I just started with 5 balls, 2 cans of 3 tennis balls each, and 6 tennis balls, and the answer is 11. And so this is kind of a one-off ad hoc evaluation where we can eyeball it and say, okay, this looks correct. And we'll go into detail right now. Amazing. So for this exercise, as we get started, if you can follow this bit.ly link, and I'll also share my screen as we go along, but it'll be best to follow along in a workbook. And we'll give some time for people to just sign up and set this up because a lot of the exercises will focus on this environment, and it has a lot of the connection strings set up to use a lot of the models that we'll be testing out. And so let me share my screen. People can still see my screen, correct?
And the link's in the chat for everyone.
Perfect. Amazing. And so I'll give it a few moments for people to go through the link, and they'll be able to see this. To follow along, what you'll need to do is actually clone the workbook I have here. And this clone will require just signing in with your email, but after you sign in, you can execute all the different cells, and we'll be going through a lot of these techniques one by one. And there's also an exercise at the end, which will require using GPT-4 or ChatGPT, and this will make it free and easy for people to use. And so I'll give it a minute for people to set this up. Maybe I can also monitor chat to see if people have been able to set this up. Just a quick thumbs up would be helpful. And let me know if I can help. Nice. Eric is in there. Sarah as well. Amazing. Okay. A few thumbs ups are popping in. Okay, I'll give it another minute as people are getting this set up for the workshop. Nice. Me too, Eric. I mean, this is the meat of the workshop, which will be running against the different models, trying different techniques, having some exercise of prompting, eval runs, these type of stuff. And so I'm excited. Okay, we've gotten a few more thumbs up. The thumbs ups are coming in. I'll give it until the 29-minute mark, and then we'll get started. Amazing. I love it. Some people are also thumbs up, other thumbs up, which is great. Okay, it's a 29-minute mark, so we'll get started. So people can see my screen. This is where it gets a lot more fun. I like to talk about the intro and topics up front, but this is where I get to actually write some prompts, a little bit of code, and so this is much more enjoyable for me. Cool. So talking a little about this workbook. This workbook was inspired from Deep Learning AI's learning series on ChatGPT Prompt Engineer. This is particularly great. I highly recommend their second and third course as well. The reason why I recommend the Deep Learning.ai course is because it's designed for engineers and developers. And so it's pretty systematic in terms of how to think about prompting. Generally, if you're using ChatGPT for personal use cases, you don't have to follow as much rigor because it might be a question that you ask it and you kind of have the chat history as you go along. But for business use cases or actual applications, you need to follow a bit more rigor because you want to make sure that the responses that you get are pretty predictable and aligned to what you're trying to get out of it. And so we'll start this off. The first principle that I like to go through is using delimitators. So what is the delimitator? It's a way to fragment off the context of what you're passing on the model from the actual instruction and the role that you're providing into the prompt. And so for this here, the instruction that I have is summarize this text delimited by 3 triple backticks into a single sentence. Here's the delimitator. I assign it a variable. I'm using handlebar syntax, and the variable is text here. And the text is, let me bring this up real fast for folks. Here we go. Okay, the text is you should express what you want a model to do by providing instructions that are clear and specific as you possibly can, X, Y, and Z, but it's more of a paragraph long. And so being able to delineate exactly what's the text that you want to run. So these triple backticks is a way to separate out and give information to the model to say, this is separate from the instruction. And so when I execute this, it's able to understand, okay, the text that was provided with the 3 delineation or delimiters are the ones that I should focus on, and the instruction is separated out. This is kind of the baseline where we're starting from. Next, these LLMs are actually quite good at returning structured response. And structured response is quite important because oftentimes for business applications, you might be working with a JSON object, or you might be trying to produce a markdown file. And so how do you actually use it to provide structured response? And so here, the initial part of it is providing the instruction, which is generate a list of 3 Oh, sorry. By the way, this is all interactive. And so everybody who's created the workbook, you can click play. You can also modify as you go along. I do nudge people not to modify the cells below yet, because it will look really weird when I'm talking about something and your cell is already different. But everything above, feel free to modify as much as you want. So next is for asking for structured output. So for this structured output, the instruction I provided is generate a list of 3 made-up book titles along with their authors and genres. Provide them in a JSON format with the following keys. And so there's 2 things that's happened here, which is I'm asking it to return a JSON object, and then I'm asking for it to have a certain structure, which is book ID, title, author, and genre. When I execute this, it returns it down into JSON format, and I see that it has book ID, title, author, and genre. One thing I actually like to do while I'm going through this is within the settings, I'll change the parameters. So part of the parameters I like to change is first, I don't really need to remember chat context because each cell is different within this workbook. Next, I like to reduce temperature. How many people know what temperature is for these models? I don't have the chat up, so I don't actually see if people are responding, but I'll just give the answer, which is temperature is adding some randomness or noise. It's extremely useful for content generation because I'm looking for inspiration and I'm looking for variability. However, when you're building business applications, temperature can actually be quite difficult to use because, for example, if I'm getting different structured results every time I run it, it makes it difficult to program an application or workflow around it. And so I like to reduce the temperature to 0 for some of these use cases to make it a little bit more predictable. And so I can execute again, reducing the temperature. Results are great, which gives me the title, made-up author, and the genre. And then I can also change it into Markdown format. And so follow along here as I change it from this to this. Feel free to do it yourself as well as you go along. And then for the Markdown format, I will separate out into, I think it's nice to have a header with book ID. And then I could have a subheader with the title. And then I'll make a same size for these. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Let's see how this goes. Oh, I think I need to separate out a second. Then Markdown format. Okay. It's still adding it together. 1 second. Maybe I just need to put it together. Okay, cleaner Markdown format. Yeah, but you can start specifying the output formats for these, which is quite nice. I have a few more examples. I won't fine tune the Markdown format here yet, but there are more examples down below. Next, one thing to do that's quite useful is to sanity check whether the conditions are satisfied. And so for this example, once again, I'm using the delimitators up front, which is you'll be provided with text delimited by triple quotes. If it contains a sequence of instructions, rewrite those instructions in the following format, which is step 1 through n. This is once again a separate format that's provided, which is can you enumerate the list of results that it's providing? And then at the very end, I put in this conditional statement that says, if the text does not contain a sequence of instructions, then simply write no steps provided. Once again, the triple back quotes, the backticks here are used to delimitate the text. And the text I'm using here is first instruction based, which is making a cup of tea is easy. First, you need to get some boiling water, water boiling. While that's happening, grab a cup and put a tea bag in it, and X, Y, and Z for the instructions. And then I can execute it. And because it is instructions put into a paragraph, it separates it out. It removes some of the filler. So you can see that it removed the making a cup of tea is easy. And it just did the first step as get some boiling water. And it went through end to end. So now the next question is, does it really validate whether it works for determining whether the sequence of instructions there or not? The next cell I have is actually taking the same exact input text, which is here, and then changing the overall text used, to text 2, which is the sun is shining brightly and the birds are all singing. It's a beautiful day to go for a walk in the park. And then, let me also add text 2 at the bottom here. Take in the delimiter. And feel free to follow along as you're going through this, since these are all accessible to everyone here. Amazing. And as you can see, it took the input of the previous cell. And so the instructions provided in the previous cell were here. It took this, and then it combined it with the delimited text 2, which is more of a description of the day, no real instructions provided, and it responded with no text provided. And so one thing I've just done there is providing a conditional statement for the responses, and it works quite well. Next, we go into few-shot prompting. Few-shot prompting is an extremely powerful approach, especially if you don't have a lot of data, where you're able to provide context and data into the model and let the model use the input to learn to return the response. In essence, this actually goes quite well with the RAG style approach, which is retrieval augmentation. And so in retrieval augmentation, you're dynamically generating the context that's most relevant. For the few-shot prompting, we're just hard coding it, but you can imagine if we want to scale this out, we would start doing this kind of retrieval augmentation approach. And so this one's quite simple. It says, your task is to answer in a consistent style. And the child asks, teach me about patience. And the grandparent will then say, the river that carves the deepest valley flows from a modest spring. And it has a nice little sentence there from the grandparent, a lot of wisdom. And the next, the child says, teach me about resilience. And then you can actually execute this. And the grandparent responds in the same type of style that you provided, which is quite phenomenal that it's able to infer the style from child, grandparent, child, and come up with a similar response while not repeating exactly what was said before. And so you're able to use this few-shot prompting technique to continue the chain of behavior and chain of pattern as you're going along. This is where it gets a little bit bizarre, and there's more bizarre stuff I'll show later, but this gets a little bit bizarre where you can give the model time to think. Oftentimes, if you give it a complex task and you ask for the specific result to return at the end, it might fail. But if you ask the model to actually think through the steps and provide the outline of the steps that it takes, it actually has a higher success rate of better accuracy results. And so for this here, the instructions provided were perform the following actions. Summarize the following text, delimited by triple backticks with one sentence. Translate the summary into French. List each name in the French summary. Output a JSON object that contains the following keys: French summary, number of names. Separate your answers with line breaks. And I put in the text, and the text is here in the parameters, which is, in a charming village, siblings Jack and Jill went on a quest to fetch water. And so I can execute this over here. And because I've separated out the overall actions, it has a better time answering the response rather than having these all combined together. And you'll see this quite common as we go along across different examples, where segmenting it out into these step-by-step instructions leads to much higher results for the model, as opposed to having these all together into a single paragraph. And so make sure to specify steps and make sure to break it out to get the instructions that you need. Amazing. And also returns a JSON object here at the end.
We have a question about temperature from Eric.
Sure. What's the question? Okay. If I submit the same prompt and have the temperature, we'll get it. So great question, Eric. Yes, you will get the same response. There have been occasions where even though setting the temperature to 0 hasn't guaranteed the exact same response, but most times it will. And this was done on purpose to make sure that you can have more predictable responses. The other thing to watch out for is OpenAI. They do it a little bit less now, but at the beginning used to constantly update the model, which meant that even if the temperature is 0, use it one day and then use it the next day, if they retrained parts of the model, you would get a different response. Nowadays, they have pretty good version control. And so you can pin it to an older version. However, because these models are so expensive, they won't maintain a long history of it. And so often every few months, they'll call out that that version is going to be deprecated. And so you have to move on to the next version. But temperature does help build more reproducibility of certain responses. And so setting temperature to 0 is really critical for building applications. Any other questions?
Josh asked about bias detection and mitigation in tabular data.
Oh, okay. Okay. Bias detection and mitigation in tabular data. Can I get a little bit more context on this, Josh?
We can come back to this later.
Okay, we can come back to it. Or if you have a mic, yeah, you can ask a quick question, but see, Josh, are you there? Okay, put it into the comment section and I'll get to it right after. Maybe. Next is asking for an output in a specified format. And so right here at the front, you see same type of instructions, which is your task is to perform the following actions. Now I can actually have it using a structured format, similar to the cell we used up above, which was like JSON format versus Markdown. This one I can say, use the following format where text is text to summarize, summary is a summary, translation, summary, translation, names, output JSON, and here's the text. The thing to call out here, which is quite remarkable, is these aren't in typical coding, since most people have coded before here. It's not actually variable names I'm specifying. It's mostly just I'm assigning some natural language, so-called variable. I'm not actually using it anywhere, but the model is able to infer that text and text to summarize is about the overall text before or the overall text below. And so it's able to infer, okay, that's the text I'm supposed to summarize. And once I create a summary, that will be the summary. And then afterwards, I'll translate it, which will be the translation, and I'll refer to it. And so it's able to make these natural correlations of what you're talking about and what you're telling the model to do. This is quite powerful. But there's one thing to know about this is if you find that you're providing potentially conflicting or convoluted instructions where it's not clear what summary is referring to, the model will oftentimes make a mistake. And so having clarity, not just in writing, it's more of LLM clarity, where you're able to specify the instruction or task to make sure that the model can understand what's the difference, will help yield better results. And so here I'm able to execute this with the same text from before. It's able to return. One thing to also note is GPT-4 is a bit slower than other ones. And so when you're working with business applications that require some type of like latency requirement, generally, I don't recommend GPT-4 yet because it does take some time for it to load. It does return the highest quality results. It just takes a longer time and usually has a higher cost. And so if you use GPT-4.5, I've heard that Palm 2 is extremely fast and good for low latency. So you might want to mix and match depending on your use case. And for people who don't know, Palm is Google's models.
We have a few questions.
Okay.
One is if you can use any other delimiter as opposed to the triple backticks delimiter. And then Josh expanded on his question as well.
Okay, so for the 1 second, the delimiters, you can use anyone, but make sure that it's not something that's commonly used in text. Because a lot of times you're giving free form text into the input. And so some people might say like, well, should I use just quotation marks? But there are quotation marks that show up in the text, which can cause confusion. And so nobody really uses triple backticks. And so it's a nice way of doing it. And I think also triple backticks from the coding side are a good way to, comment stuff out and put it into string. And so overall, people have leaned towards it, but it can be anything. It doesn't have to be this. And so you can choose whatever, just make sure that it doesn't have collision, causing the model to get confused.
The next one is around giving the model time to think. And are we achieving this by giving the model more specific instructions and chunks?
Yes and no. So sorry, that's not a real answer. But giving the model time to think doesn't actually require more specific instructions. It just requires more a sequential train of thought. And so if I were to go up here one option that I could have with here was actually just removing the enumeration and putting it into a paragraph form. And typically, if I was doing this, just like if I was talking to anyone, I'd say, oh, make sure you summarize the text and then with one sentence and translate the summary into French, and then list out each name in French summary and output as a JSON object, right? And for us, totally reasonable. There's nothing really wrong with it. If anything, it's identical to what I just showed before, but the model actually performs worse when you don't actually enumerate, because it's taking the instruction set all together. And it actually means that sometimes, and it doesn't happen all the time, it might miss an instruction where, because it's more of a complex instruction, it might have just done the first part of the instruction and disregarded the second half. When you enumerate it, it does a much better job of making sure that each one is executed and it's able to go step by step. It doesn't mean that you have to start with this. You can actually start with the former, but I have typically found that once you do enumerate and separate it out, it will be significantly better. Nowadays, I just started off with enumeration because I've gone through this enough times and burned enough times where I keep the instructions all together that it fails, that enumeration works quite well. The only time enumeration has really failed me was when my instruction set, I enumerate multiple things, or the enumeration list gets really long. I've had times where I've tried to enumerate 10, 15 things and it loses some of the clarity of the instructions in between. I also had times where I've provided an instruction set of do these instructions 1 through 4, and then do another set of instructions 1 through 4, and that hasn't really worked out. And that gets a little bit into chaining. I know someone earlier on said about LangChain, and you can separate these things out. That's also an opportunity here. As you can also tell within this workbook, because these variables, you can reference cells before. And so, I can say, I think there was one where I used cell 3. Sorry, might be making this a little bit dizzy for folks. Oh, yeah. So I can actually reference the variable name I set above. I can create this type of chaining architecture as well, where I have this cell here. I can reference the input, the output, or different global variables, which you can see on the right side, and use it throughout and create these chained applications. Amazing. Great question.
We have quite a few questions. I don't know if you want to maybe just review these a little later.
Okay.
During the break.
During the break, yeah. We'll put a big bookmark in, and then I'll get back to the questions. Amazing. So this is where it gets also quite interesting. I think everyone probably knows that the running joke is that LLMs are not good at math. And, every time someone's like, are these models going to take over the world? Usually everyone's response is just like, if you can do simple arithmetic, that's when I'll be really, scared. And it is true that generally math, it doesn't do as well. Part of it is based off of the model architecture. For attention, all you need, for example, is if I told someone I paid $10 for that, let me think. I paid $10 to grab that cup of coffee, the venti at Starbucks, the special latte. The context of the model won't really know if 10, 7, 8, what is more predictable, or what's the probability that it's better. And so the numerical values the weights can kind of change because it's very different from text, where context helps decide what's next. Numerical values are very specific, where 3 plus 5 equals 8. But if 5 switches to 4, then it's 7. And these implicit relationships are a bit different. And so math has always been a bit tough for these LLMs. There are ways to do around it. And so for here, the example is determine if the student's solution is correct or not. Question, I'm building a solar panel installation and I need help working out the financials. Land costs about 100 per square foot. I can buy solar panels for 250 per square foot. I negotiate a contract with maintenance that'll cost me a flat 100K per year, an additional $10 per square foot. What is the total cost for the first year of operations as a function of the number of square feet? And this is the proposed student solution, which is let X be the size of the installation in square feet. Cost, land cost is 100X, solar panel is 250X, and a maintenance cost is 100,000 as a fixed cost plus 100X. So total cost is 100X plus 250X plus 100X. 100,000 plus 100X equals 450 plus 100X. So if I run this here, you'll see that it says it's correct, but actually it's not incorrect. And so because it's incorrect, why is the model kind of incorrect on this? And why is it struggling to answer this? Well, the problem is actually, it's not really thinking through the problem. And so one thing you can actually do to help fix it is you can actually segment it out into different sets of instructions. So your first step is to determine if the student solution is correct or not, or your task is to determine if the solution is correct or not. To solve the problem, do the following. First, work out your own solution to the problem. And so you're asking the model to think through the problem. Next, you're saying compare your solution with the student solution and evaluate if the student solution is correct or not. Don't decide if the student solution is correct until you have done the problem yourself. And so I have split it out. I've asked the model to actually calculate the answer itself. Then I've asked the model to do a comparison based off of the calculated solution. And so here I can execute this. So these are just the input that was put in. Given that X is the size of installation in square feet, the costs are as follows. Land cost 100X, solar panel 250X, maintenance cost is 100,000 plus 10X. So the total cost for the first year equals to the sum of all costs. This is the equation. And then is the student solution the same as the actual solution just calculated? No. And the student's grade is correct. So that one's also incorrect, where I don't think a student's grade can be incorrect, but overall it has some of these problems where if you give it a full set of instructions, it might not produce the best results, especially with arithmetic or math. But if you break it out and ask the problem to answer it itself and then correct itself, you can find that it has much higher success rate. Okay, and now we're going into hallucinations. This is a really, really interesting one where most people are excited to talk about because there is a lot of buzz around it. It's the biggest concern for businesses. I do have to be very transparent. To invoke a hallucination used to be quite easy. Now it's getting harder as the models are getting better. But it used to be, I can make up a brand and I can just say, tell me about this brand, and it will make a hallucination. Nowadays, it's not as easy. But so I've hacked this together where I actually use GPT 3.5 because I know that this is a problem with GPT 3.5 or ChatGPT. And so if I say, tell me about Aeroglide Smart Toothbrush by Bowie, it makes things up. This doesn't exist, but it comes with high confidence and it gives me a whole description, 25,000 strokes per minute. This is like an amazing toothbrush, right? But it's all hallucinating and fabricating it. And this is a real thing. And countering hallucinations, there are techniques which I can talk a little bit about. I don't have any slides on it, but I do have some techniques available if people are interested. And just kind of going into how I've hacked this together. If I use GPT-4, which is the latest model, it will answer that information on a product called this does not manufacture a range of toothbrushes. So it knows that this is incorrect and it's countering the hallucination. General theme overall is that as the models get better, they're reducing hallucination. And so you're going to find it performing a lot better. It doesn't mean that it'll ever get rid of all hallucinations. It's part of the reason why MLs have some inaccuracy. But there are some techniques to mitigate as much as possible to make it more applicable for businesses. Amazing. So we're about to hit the first real exercise. I hope people have been playing around as I've been going through the workbook, just trying different cells out, getting familiar with how to execute the ins and outs and some of the techniques I've talked about. This is the real exercise. And the real exercise, it's a fun one, which is create a summary of the text below written for a fifth grader. And the summary should include a title. So you want a first line title, a summary, and then a bonus is if you can do selective bolding or italicizing for the vocabulary words for sixth graders, which means can you selectively choose the words within the text that you produce that can be geared towards sixth graders as opposed to fifth graders, and probably output in Markdown so you can see the selective highlighting. Then for extra bonus, if you can actually identify the vocabulary words that are more difficult and include the actual dictionary of vocabulary words with the fifth grade definitions towards the bottom. So this is a fun one where you're able to combine all the different techniques. And the text I have here is So I created this when there was a lot of the LK99 trends. And so it's actually, I think it's part of the abstract of the LK99 paper that came out, which is the room temperature superconductor, which we're not really too sure on. But overall, it's a fun one because it's very complex. Obviously, a fifth grader would struggle to get through this. And so would love to see people go through this. And so there's a cell here, empty cell. You can set the text and we'll see what people can do. Amazing. And while people are starting on the exercise, I think I've allocated about 5 to 10 minutes for this exercise. I might have to also speed up as we go along. But I'll check in at the 5-minute mark to see how people are doing. And then if people need a little bit more time, we could give a little bit more time. And within this exercise time, if it's okay with people, I can also answer some of the questions as people are working through the exercise. How does that sound? Oh, let me open the chat. I have no idea. People are saying.
So there's 5 minutes for this, and then the break is, or the evaluation is 5 minutes as well.
Okay.
And then the break is 5 minutes. So we can kind of
combine. Yeah.
Um,
Okay. We'll combine it. We'll go free form.
Yeah.
I'm generally always bad with agendas, but we'll make it on time. Don't worry, folks. Cool. Let me answer some questions as people are working through this this exercise. Okay, where did we leave off on? And then let me just go through as many as I can.
So there's a couple of questions about the biases question, describing images, more about temperature.
Okay, let's go from okay, so Josh's question, let's see if there's a follow-up to it. Data sets used in training an AI system can be inclusive of bias part. So I'm asking if the prompt engineering can be used to access the data set to bring their biases. Really good question, Josh, on biases in the training data. Prompt engineering is not great for determining biases because it's all about correlation. The best way to do biases actually is probably in the training data to do classic data science of like the correlations that's seen. It can help though, because oftentimes some of the biases can actually be within naturally encoded in the unstructured data. So for structured data, detecting biases is a lot easier, where based off ethnicity or the region that you live in, like location, if certain correlations with certain decisions made by the model, then you can detect these biases early. For unstructured data, it's really different, where so I am of Korean heritage, and if I used a mix of Korean and English as I talked, and there are, different comments that I've done that have this natural inflection, and that's being used unknowingly in a neural net as input to determine certain decisions about me, that's kind of a deep-seated bias. And generative AI can help with that, which is processing unstructured data to identify some of these classifiers and better handling of unstructured data. But outside of that, it's quite difficult, and it probably leans more towards the standard data science techniques. Amazing. And then that was Josh.
Mara's question about describing images.
Amazing. Describing images. So I don't know if people have seen GPT-4V. It just got announced and released. It's extremely good with describing images. And so it's not available through API, so you can't really program against it yet, but that model is quite powerful. I think, if you can find the link for GPT-4V, we can put a post in the comments there for people to read up on. It's really quite phenomenal, which really breaks kind of the bridge of, if you have any type of diagram, you can put it in and it can give you, extract a lot of information out of it. Amazing. Okay. When requesting a structured format, ad hoc results appear to consistently follow the format. How come? Oh, really good question, Jeff. So Jeff's question is, when requesting a structured format and ad hoc results appear, how confident am I that the structure will always follow the format? Generally pretty confident, but I'll also put a linter or even another model to check on the format. And reproduce the results if it doesn't provide the right format. And so I would say this is my ballpark of what I've experienced. 1 out of 10 depends on the prompting and the temperature, might cause an incorrect format. I'll have another chain part, a function that says validate whether it's valid JSON or validate if it is proper markdown. If not, regenerate the results. I can also use another LLM to validate the results. It's a bit overkill where you're using something that's really, really powerful to do validation. But yeah, sorry, Marie France has an amazing avatar that just popped up, which hi Marie France. This is amazing. Okay, Eric had the next question. Is the delimiter issue the LM version of SQL injection? No, delimiter issue is not this is really great, Eric. It's a mix where it's not actually the delimiter issue for LM version where it doesn't fix it. That still exists where when you pass in context straight from a user into a model, you can potentially like for this SQL injection, you could put drop table, right? You can potentially also prompt it, right? So you can technically also put backticks in your context that you provided. There are currently some innovations happening on how to protect against prompt injection. Nothing I've read so far where it's foolproof yet, but there's some novel research happening there. I think there are definitely some concerns with prompt injections. Yeah. Oh, really good question though. Yeah, this is definitely something that's pretty high on people's lists on what they're thinking about. By prompting to translate a paragraph of instructions to steps like these, can giving the model time to think process be effectively automated? Yes, it can be effectively automated. It just means that the automation might take a bit longer. But yeah, it does happen. And sometimes you can actually chain it where you can have a model output the instructions. How would you break down this task and then feed it into another model or another execution of the model to actually execute those results. We'll go into a little bit of that meta where model input to model or model evaluates model a bit afterwards. I think I have it in the next exercise, which is fun. Can ChatGPT help prove and derive a mathematical formula? It can help, but I don't fully trust it. It can have mistakes. And so, yeah, it's a bit different. So math is definitely one of the weak parts, but there are, I think last I've seen, there is an integration to Wolfram Alpha as like an API plugin or a plugin. And so that will definitely work significantly better. Yeah. Talking about tools and math does not. LastMile does not support a calculator as of today. It's mostly a workbook workflow environment where you can build out these applications. So we're currently in the exploration phase where you can try out different models, which I haven't actually shown to people. Oh, maybe I've shown it by a little bit, but you can actually try out a suite of different models, execute and see different results. You can try it with different prompts and parameters, and that's the exploration phase. And then it goes into more of the workflow and productionization phase, which is will come up in this workshop later on. Amazing. Is voice being enabled to query instead of typing? So that is a feature request we've seen where some folks are like, hey, can I input my own voice, have a model to translate voice to text, use that text into another cell. Currently, we have it where if you record it through QuickTime or something, you can actually upload the voice file. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. It might be a good option to have something where we can have the voice enabled so that you can just talk and then it'll prompt it right off the fly. Thank you for the feedback. A new paper came out from Cornell last week. The geometry of truth shows an emergent linear structure analysis. Amazing. I'll take a read of this. Did you share? If you can also, Mark, share the link to the paper, I would love to take a read. Thank you. Okay. Question: are there any libraries or papers forcing hallucination, like Clever Hans library, but for Gen AI would be cool? Would definitely be interested in texting image. Whoa, interesting. Okay. Arena is interesting in forcing hallucinations. I think not a lot of, there are some papers out there. A lot of the ways that people are finding hallucinations, to be quite honest, are a lot of forums for support or issues that happen. They're usually because something that they've done has enforced a hallucination. And so ways to find out other ways that hallucinations are happening, I found there are a lot of the forums online where people are like, I've gotten a really crazy result, unexpected, and it turns out something in there has forced a hallucination. And so that's how I find a lot of it. I think there are some papers. If I stumble upon one, I'll actually send them out. Thanks, Serena. Okay, Aldo, can you briefly explain how can an LM understand problems and create formulas? So the LLM understands the problem and the fact that it's able to, so I think the way to understand these LLMs are it's ingested a mass amount of information and it's created some type of link, especially within natural language text of like correlations of what steps and how things happen. Actually, Jeff probably did a better job than I. There's a video that provides a better explanation that Jeff provided. I'll also take a look at it, but yeah. But at a high level, basically, it's learned this massive corpus of information and it's made some correlations of the data that's been put in as it gives these instructions. Understanding is really dissecting the instructions and kind of going to make these natural correlations that it's built into its system to predict what's next. And if you give it instructions, it's able to understand that natural context and the correlations it's had and build upon predictive context of what happens afterwards. Yeah. The conspiracy to make AI seem harder than it is. I actually love that title. I haven't seen the video, but I love that title because I am very much on the same boat where I think AI generally suffers from a problem where people overcomplicate things. And so it's oftentimes difficult to break into, especially ML. And ML is kind of a subset of AI. And I love when a lot of these kind of things debunk some of the complexity. And oftentimes the complexity is just where people add new terminologies like RAG and these things on top of it that makes it a little bit less approachable. Okay, we might be at time.
Yep.
And so I'll take another quick pause. I will remember that I stopped at Jeff's comment on video. Amazing. Have people been able to get it running? And let's see. The same issue. Okay, there's an issue here. I'm stuck with workbook execution already in progress. When I tried to edit cell 11, I made a couple, but I don't think I've run anything. Can you refresh and try again? I wonder if it might be possible that we have so many people running it that it's all hitting the same. Can you try on GPT 3.5 to see what happens? Amazing. Has anybody been able to successfully get a response? And if so, can you actually paste it in the comments? I'd love to take a look. Well, let's cover just a few impressive ones. And I'll also be able to, I'm more curious, not at the output, but I'm more curious about the prompt that was used and some of the techniques. Amazing. A few are trickling in. One is perform the following text in the triple backticks, create a text summary title. Actually, I'm just going to copy and paste it so everyone can see here. So this is from Gene, which is perform the following on the text in the triple backticks, create a title for the summary of the text for a 5th grader using markdown bold vocabularies that are suitable for a 6th grader, identify vocabularies that are too difficult for a 5th grader, and then let me add the text and run it. I do handlebar syntax, put this in, and then let's copy this text over. And copy here. Amazing. And parameters. Okay, let's give this a shot. Amazing. So you have your title, you have your summary. It has a quick little definition here. This is called superconductivity. Nice use of exclamation points for 5th graders, kind of the emotion in the summary. I love it. Vocabulary words for a 6th grader, synthesizing, superconductor, critical temperature. So one thing I've also run into this before is it's actually giving vocabulary words from the original text instead of the summary. And so this will require a bit of prompting, but this is amazing. And then the hard vocabulary words, And so it's showing some of the text, the vocabulary words from the original text, as opposed to what was the derived summary. And so just a quick prompting there can get it for just a summary so that it's designed for a fifth grader. Amazing. I love some of these. Keep them coming. I love to look at these and kind of run through, but we'll continue on because I think there's more exciting content to cover.
Yep, a few people have been asking about workflows.
Amazing. Okay, that is a perfect segue into workflows. Okay. And I'm going to close the comments tab again, or the little dialogue. So I won't see anything yet, but I think Elaine is monitoring closely. Okay, we'll get started with AI workflows. So we've gone through workbooks, which covered the first three boxes. Next, it's offline evaluation. What is offline evaluation? Well, how do you actually evaluate this on a number of different results, which is if you have, let's say, testing it on Google's models and you're testing it on OpenAI's models, how do you actually run it across both to say which one is definitively better? If it's better on one response, is it even worthwhile? It doesn't need to be better at 10, 15, 20, 30. So how do you actually run a bulk evaluation to see whether it's improved or not? And this is quite important because even for the example that we ran through, the exercise, what happens when there's a regression? Like, let's say you've improved the prompt, but it's doing worse on some of the initial test cases that you've run. How do you actually test to make sure that there's no regressions happening? You can do back testing to make sure that every time you improve the model, you haven't accidentally made it worse on some other cases. And so this is where bulk evaluation kicks in. And bulk evaluation is the combination of your prompts, your input data, the model that you're testing, and you get certain responses. And evaluating the responses right now is difficult. I'll show a technique afterwards. But how can you actually run this at scale, and how do you know whether it's working or not? And this is where you get into the second exercise. For the second exercise, please follow the link. I think Elaine's also going to post in the comments here. And I think I'm still showing my screen, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, did I delete it? No. Okay, perfect. So quick high level about this exercise. So this exercise is a tone preserving translation. Quick bit of context. So Google released a paper of attention all you need because it really focused on translation as the initial use case. And so translation, it does extremely well because it was one of the earliest kind of use cases that was thought of for these large language models. And so for this example, I have some text over here, which is our previous employer, which is from Facebook, and they released from Instagram called Threads. And this is a bit of snippet of the text that they have, which is Mark Zuckerberg announced initial version of Threads, X, Y, and Z. This is nice because the post was released in English and Spanish. And so there is the source text here, and then there's their translated text here. Now, can we do better with a model? Can we actually do this better with a model to do this type of translation? This is a little bit more of a complex style. And so I'm combining some of the techniques that you've already seen in the AI workbooks. And so let's go through the techniques I'm going through here. So the instruction I give is translate the following markdown text to the target language. And the target language I'm using, and I'm using a global variable here, which is the parameters. These are the local ones, which I've migrated over to the right side as a global variable. And so the target language I want to translate to is Spanish. And Spanish has a formal and informal tone. And so I want to use a formal tone. I also want to remove certain words. For example, threads even is like part of the product. So I don't want to actually translate threads into Spanish. It's part of the product name, and it has SEO qualities where people are going to search for threads. And so how do I keep threads? And so I have an exception list. So it's a glossary of words that I don't want it to translate. And then I provide it to source text. So here I can execute it, and I'm able to get the translation for the text I have above. And so you can see it kept threads, which is perfect what I wanted. And I actually don't speak Spanish or very poorly. And so I can't fully say whether it is in the formal tone, but I will trust that it's in the formal tone. If not, I have another technique, which is over here. This is where it gets really like a little bit meta, even though that's another pun. can you actually evaluate the performance of the results that were provided with the overall model? So for example, right now, I think we have the translation results and the source text. You can actually use GPT-4 to actually grade the results from the previous cell, saying, take a look at the original source text, take a look at the translated text that was produced by GPT-4. It doesn't provide the context, and you can make sure that the context doesn't flow through. And then can you give it a grade? And the grade should range from poor, average, good to excellent. So the example result I have here is good. And then can you actually give an explanation of why you gave this grade? And so one of the leading ways of actually doing this is to actually use GPT to evaluate itself. So I'd love to go through this exercise with folks. Can you actually run through and create a evaluation cell where you're using GPT to grade its own translation? And so feel free to clone it again. And then the first exercise is over here. Create a new text-to-text cell and then build one out right here. Amazing. And we'll give another 5 to 10 minutes on this exercise. We'll give 5 minutes because after you run it once, we're going to be running it on a list of examples. Amazing. And one thing I do want to ask is try not to change the list of parameters here on the right side. Keep it as is, just because as you run a workbook, I have some sample data for people to run on. But if the number of parameters is different, then you have to add an additional data. This will just make it easy for the next section where we build it into a workflow. Perfect. Does that sound good for folks? Exercise 2. Amazing. Okay, ask away any questions and happy to help out. So the task at hand is, can you create a GPT-4 or GPT cell to evaluate the translation that was generated from the previous cell and the original text? Okay, one question I got that's directly related to the exercise is this evaluation feature part of GPT-4 itself now? And can you use it via API? So OpenAI does have evaluators that are open source. This is not part of the API. You're actually using the model itself as a function to grade itself. So I can give a very quick one. This won't be as good as what people are going to be building. But for example, I can say, grade the translated or the target language text, or grade the translated target text based off of the source text. And then I can do source text, which is the original. And then I could do the translated text, which would be the output of the previous cell. What is the target translation? Okay, there we go. So this is a very basic one. I haven't specified the type of grades to give it, which would be poor, average, good, and excellent. I also haven't really given it some more specific information of that formality of the language. And then it doesn't actually give a full response and a full description of why it's given that grade, because I haven't really asked it to. And so this is a quick example of, just how to evaluate it. But yeah, I'm curious to see people create their own evaluators. Amazing. Okay. Amazing. I mean, you're all a great audience. I love all the questions and the interactivity. Love it. And feel free to keep sending me questions. I'll answer it as we're going through this exercise. Also, feel free to send over your prompts if you're like, hey, I'm close. I feel like I'm evaluating, but I wasn't able to do this thing. How do I do this part of it? Or can I put something in a variable? Happy to answer any questions as we go along. But we'll give it another few more minutes and then we'll go into the workflow section. Glad to hear, Eric. I'm gonna give a reaction, maybe a celebration reaction to it. No worries, Nathan. Yeah, feel free. I have a bunch of resources at the end to share out, and so would love to yeah, share it out to you and definitely get your feedback. And yeah, thank you so much. This is James. Yes, that's right. This is something that we've been actually debating about, and so would love to have input on it. In typical ChatGPT, the enter is execute. And so if I go here and I click enter, it executes. But shift enter is for new line. We kind of go back and forth because it's not really the same with notebooks. And it's kind of, or Jupyter notebooks, and it's kind of a hybrid where OpenAI's ChatGPT has kind of set a precedence for enter being, you want to just like chat really quickly, so you keep pressing enter. While Jupyter notebooks, it's control enter, and so we're on the fence, and so we'd love feedback on that. I like enter makes new lines, and control enter means execute. So this is the reverse behavior. Okay, nice. So let me try new lines, enter. Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'd love to see, can people thumbs up Eric's comment if they like new line being enter and shift enter being execute? Okay, I'm seeing, yeah, okay. The thumbs up are coming in. Amazing. Okay, this is good feedback. Amazing. Okay, in the example notebook, the cell target translation text doesn't have any, but the prompt still works. Great question, Jeff. So the actual parameters are on the right side now. So if you go into full screen, we have something called global parameters, which are used across all the cells, while each individual cell has local parameters. And so for this one, I set it all as global parameters because I wanted to reuse it across cells, and I didn't want to specify the target language again across different cells. And so it's all on this right side. If you could see my mouse. Yeah, okay, that's also good feedback. I think we collapse it on the smaller and then we increase it, so we'll take that. Amazing. Oh, nice. We got a prompt from Eric. Act as a language translation evaluator. Compare the source text and translated text. Provide a grade and a list that summarize a comparison for each item in the list. Include an indication of quality. Provide a single sentence summary. So one thing I see with this, Eric, is it can be really useful to do the numeric separation. And so I would do step 1, compare the source text and translated text. Step 2, provide a grade and the list that summarizes the comparison. Step 3. And then the other thing is for the grade, I think someone, maybe it might have been Eric, you might have also mentioned it. Let me think. Somebody had mentioned pretty good, like what is a grade? You know, like some places do numeric grades, 90, 95, 85. Some people do A, B, C, D. Some people have an E and an F. I think in the US, we don't have an E, or might change based off the states. And so you might want to add in a part that's like grade the following in one of the grades. And this would be for average, good, excellent, like this. And so I've given a finite list of choices. And this is, you can make it much more predictable in the responses, which also means that if you take the results and put into some type of visualization, it'd be easy to filter out what it's doing well on and what's doing poorly on. Amazing. Jean, you're expert Spanish speaker. Evaluate the translation accuracy and quality of the following. What a good, bad, a nice. It's binary, good and bad. Amazing. Provide a few sentences in your grade. Source text and target text. Amazing. This looks great. I think one thing that you might want to do is the Spanish translation. You might want to just reference the output of the previous cell. And I can explain why this is so powerful. It's because when we're making the workflows, you're going to dynamically create translations and dynamically evaluate it, which means you don't want to hard code anything as a parameter. You want it to be from the output of the previous cells. And I'll show why that's so important in the next exercise. Okay, so we have some amazing. Is there a way to show the dereference prompts for debugging purposes? Can you explain more about dereference prompts? Is that prompts aren't being used, or like variables that are referring to other prompts but not being used, like a dependency chart or graph? Okay. In the meantime, we're going to keep moving forward since we have 32 minutes. Yes. Okay. So now we're going to make it into a workflow. And this comes into the next exercise, which is evaluate the model performance using GPT-4. This one should be quite simple. As long as the parameters are the same as this, I provided a sample text that can be used. And so in this Google Drive, if you click on it, I have this really simple CSV file of tone, which is formal, casual, formal, casual. So each row is a different input to be run. Source text, I have two of them being the threads launch. How do I increase the view on this? Let me open in Sheets. Maybe this will be better. We'll see. Okay, at least it shows it a little better. We have the overall columns that we want to use, which is tone, source text, target language, exception list. This is identical to, go back to the parameters I have on the right side. I seeded it with some data. So formal, casual, all in Spanish language, but two different source texts. One is about threads launch. And then the second is the New York City. There's some news that came out recently about New York City's so heavy of a city that it's starting to sink a little bit. And I put in different exception lists for the words I don't want it to translate. And download the CSV file. And then what you can do is at the top, you see run all. I can say run workflow in batch. And run workflow in batch takes a CSV, which I have downloaded. Download it again, download as CSV. Amazing. And then I can, let me add it in now. There we go. Amazing. And then I can run it in batch. And once I go into this workflow, it will kick off a batch run. So it has 4 runs for each of the rows that I specified. I can dive into each run to see what it's actually using. So the first one is the formal, it's threads, Spanish. So this is kind of the classic example that we have. I can see, oh, it's already finishing up. I can see this is the New York City one. And now I have a suite of different results. I could download the results and get a CSV file. And that CSV file is, oh, people can't see my CSV file. So let me share, well, the CSV file now has the overall translated output and the grade that you provided it. So now you've basically done a bulk evaluation run where you set your own evaluator and you run it across 4 rows. It's very small for now, but you run it on 4 rows and you're able to say, okay, it looks like it does well in translating Spanish for news articles, but it might do worse on other types of text.
Not sharing.
Yeah, I gotta, maybe I stop sharing and I share the other screen. Let me see. I'm gonna stop sharing and then share the other one, which is here. Okay, can people see this now?
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so this is the output from what I downloaded, which was source text, target language, exception list. And now I have the outputs, which is what is the translation that came out, as well as what's the grade it gives, which is the translation text is accurate. I would give this translation an A. Oh, this was actually my bad translation that I did as an example. It's not as good as everyone else's, but this is the bad one that I just put in right now. Amazing. So download the CSV file and execute as a workflow run and see what results you get for the evaluators you've created.
Eric has an error message.
Oh, okay. Let me
It appears he's doing everything correctly.
see. Let me share back to the original screen. I'll help you out. Okay. Back on the original screen. Okay. And now let me look at I think Zoom is harder for me than Gen AI. Where is the chat? Okay, there it is. Okay. Let's see. Scrolling all the way down. I'm getting an error message that reminds me to upload a CSV file IAM that is under 1 megabyte. It's 5K. Oh, how many rows are in that CSV file? 5K is still quite large. Is it the same CSV file that you downloaded? Did you download it as a CSV and just making sure that it's the right format? It might be an incorrect error message for an incorrect CSV file. And the other thing is we also limit it to 5 rows for the free tier. Oh, yes, there is a link to the CSV, which is right here. Yep. We do also limit the rows to 5 just because GPT-4 is a bit expensive. And so in the free tier, it can kind of drive up costs quite a bit. And so for the free tier, we do limit it to 5, but in the growth tier, you get access to significantly more. But the CSV file is right over here. I don't think I labeled it. I'll try, yeah. CSV file. Okay. Are other people hitting this issue? Okay, Lane is also sharing it in the chat. And it's a very, very small CSV file, so it should be perfectly fine. Okay, how are people doing? Are people able to run their first batch evaluation? Ooh, I feel like this one might be causing some issues because people are much more quiet, less comments. Also, Jeff, I love your cat. It's amazing. Your cat is amazing and adorable. Okay, I opened the spreadsheet in Google Sheets, then downloaded. I'll try downloading the original sad panda. And this is still causing you issues. I wonder if I can drop files into this chat to give it more directly. Let's see.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, amazing. Let's see if I can. I don't think I can actually. Oh, maybe. Oh, yes. Okay. How about this? I've sent it over in the chat. Any luck, Eric? No, don't watch. It's actually the cat was absolutely adorable. No. I feel like you've turned up your camera now, and then I don't get to see your cat. Yeah. Okay. I sent the file in the chat. That might help better. It's just directly as a CSV file. Are people still hitting issues? And if so, if you can paste the error message and I can try to help out. Let me also run it again just to make sure that there's no backend issue or service issue that's happening. And it still works for me. Are people able to maybe thumbs up or down if they're able to get a successful workflow run? Not uploading either. Okay, this is quite bizarre. Okay, Chirag was able to get it for three. Chirag, that one must probably because the fourth one is probably still running. So it might be delayed. Error. And the error message is please make sure that the CSV file and it's under 1 megabyte. It's working for me. Okay, so there's some mixed adding the CSV file. It's a very bizarre one. Maybe we can continue on, but Eric, I would love to follow Eric and James. I'd love to follow up afterwards, kind of figure out what's going on here. If that's okay. And maybe we can use a little bit of discussion time to help out with that. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Nothing like a few live issues to make things exciting and bring up the adrenaline. Perfect. Okay, so that was the exercise number 2, which is kind of combined with a small break. We'll go into productionization, and I'll try to go through this fast because we have 22 minutes. And I do want to also leave time for questions because there's a lot of new material here. Good slideshow. So for productionization with AI config, there's 2 real productionization paths. And productionization really refers to how do I actually use these results in production and how do I connect it to in production. So one angle of connecting to production is actually integrating into an SDK. I believe somebody early on had mentioned, they've tried out LangChain and Llama Index. We have our own. Ours is really focused on how to build enterprise grade production systems, which means how do I source control a lot of the different information I have about the models. And so we have this AI config. I'll talk about it a little bit after, but we have AI config, which we store the prompts as a config. You can source control it. It's model agnostic. You can use it with any models. It can connect into different companies' infra stacks, which makes it really friendly to use. It's developer friendly, so it uses Node, Python, SDK, and has CLI tools provided. You can execute the model in the chain of models using this SDK. And so this is one way to actually integrate it into your business applications and your application code. The really exciting thing is we open sourced it today. Just for this talk, we were open sourcing it. It's in alpha. This is the link. We would appreciate a thumbs up or a star. It's on github.com, LastMile AI config. We just announced it for this, and this is open source, so you can use it, and you can use it for however you want. You can use workbooks to actually export out some of the things that you've worked on and then use the AI config to integrate it into code. And so I have a demo prepared. And so in the demo, something that we'll be releasing soon, I think for me, I have it enabled just for me, but I can actually do this and do I get to actually download it as an AI config. And this AI config is a JSON object, the same format I showed before, and I can actually run it through code. I have a sample of code that I'm going to share right now where I show AI config in all its glory, which is right over here. Can people see my Jupyter extension? Amazing. So I'm using VS Code with the Jupyter extension. I'm installing the required packages, and the key thing here is I specify my OpenAI key, and I'm actually installing AI config. It's an open source repo now where you can leverage it and use it. This is the sample JSON data that I'm using. In order to actually use it, I just have it as a separate file here, which is parameterized data config.json. I have it open right over here. And so you can actually get this exact workable format from a workbook. And so workbook you can use for exploration, and then you can actually export the AI config from there and have this JSON object. And then it's just a little bit of code from here where I load the AI config. So I read from the JSON object. And then I set the parameters that I want. So for this one, I set one of the parameters as SQL language to MySQL, which is what it's going to translate to. What is the output data, and then the table relationships. Then I use our AI config.resolve, which actually merges the prompts that I specified in the JSON object into the AI config. I print out the completed params. And so here you have over here, the completed parameters. And now let's go and execute this against OpenAI. And so it's using my OpenAI key and using the prompts that I specified with the parameters, and it's returning the results. And so here you can see that it executed successfully. I get to return the results, and to get the output, you can use the following SQL query, which is here. I can also enable streaming if I want the content to be returned back streaming. And so this is GPT 3.5 returning streaming results. I could chain it similar to what you've seen before. I can actually chain it into multiple different prompts and parameters. And this is all open source now. So you can clone it, you can use it. We're going to put it on NPM so you can install library. And so it's a really easy way to start developing against this. And AI workbooks work seamlessly with it so that you can develop, explore with AI workbook, export that AI config, like I showed you in the button, and then run it against your code and integrate it into your applications using our open source library. This is the CRUD API here for programmatically creating and updating the prompts. And then you can always update the config. It's extremely flexible. It's all open source. And so as we go along, we're having some partners, and they'll help us build the model parsers for Llama 2 and all the other models that are out there. Really dynamic, and yeah, makes it really easy to build applications with large language models or any type of generative AI. It does work on any other type of generative AI. It's really that flexible. Amazing. Let me flip my screen again. Okay. Perfect. Yep, and this is the link to the open source repo. Feel free to watch it, start. It's an alpha. We did it just today for this session, and so excited to hear your feedback and see if it makes it a lot easier for you to build your AI applications. Amazing. The second way to productionize is through AI workflows, and so the same technology that you use for doing your overall evaluation, you can actually do for doing bulk evaluation or inference. And so one example here is, once I go back, if I want to actually translate this into any language, right? So let's say I've done the evaluation run where I have the input, I have the output, and I evaluate whether it's good results. I can actually scale this up to get translations for this in any number of languages that I want. And so one example here that I have is in my workflows. I've actually run translations off of 500 different rows for many different languages for that threads. In the same exact work that you use, in the same flow that you've gone, you're limited to 5 rows for the free tier, but in the growth tier, you can use any amount that you want. You can basically run this across many different languages. So this is Romanian. I also have it for, let's see what language, Portuguese. And let me actually show you the CSV output of what happens when you run it across so many different rows. Let me open up the file. Second. And just finding the file that I want to show. I think it is this one. No, it's input. Sorry about that. I just lost track of where I put this file for the evaluation run. it is actually, I have a better idea. I'm just going to download it again and then show you the new results. So let me download the results for the translations over here, open it up and share my screen. Okay, here we go. Can people see my screen? Amazing. So for bulk evaluation, so this is kind of the no code. I want to run the translations across 50, 100, 150 languages. What I'm able to do is actually set many different target languages here, and I switch back and forth between formal and casual tone, and I give it the same input text, and I get the target translations as well as the evaluations which are included. And this is another way to productionize, where if I am a company working on translations for marketing copy, and we deploy to 5 languages up front and then expand to 10 to 15, I can actually scale this out now, where I can actually translate it to any languages that I want. I can see whether the grade is good or poor. For the average or poor ones, I would ask for human translators to probably take that and do the translations. For the ones that says are quite good, I'll be able to use that directly. And so this is kind of a way that you can actually scale out your productionization and do this at scale. And so same flow that we went through for bulk evaluation, except now it's at scale where you can specify any number of rows and all the different variations you want and get a huge amount of results afterwards and use that for production. Amazing. Okay, cool. Sorry, it feels a little bit fast, but I think I might have done a poor job making sure that I had enough time for everything. So let me go back to the content. Okay. Amazing. Okay, we're getting closer to the end. I do have some hidden slides for semantic retrieval. In case we want to go there. I can bring it up in discussion if people want to hear that, but I'll skip that for now, just to make sure we get to the end. So key use cases. Generative AI is relatively new. LLMs are generally new. What are some of the key use cases that are coming up today? There are ways of people doing knowledge hubs where they're able to use human interaction to get a varied amount of sources of data. You can extract this data from different PDF files. A lot of people are looking at financial documents, human resources document, and you could feed that in similar to the style we saw today of few shot prompting as context. That's done in kind of the retrieval augmentation approach, where you get all of this data, you vectorize it, put it into a vector database, and then you do a k-nearest neighbors to get the appropriate context at the time of sending a question over to your large language model. They'll use that data, format the results properly, and give you a response. So knowledge hubs have become quite popular at businesses. Next is query and analytics. And so for AI config, one example, or at least the demo we showed you, was for analytics, which was asking any questions you want, translating that into a SQL statement, putting that SQL statement using a read-only key to protect against different types of like SQL injection. You can also prompt to make sure that there's no SQL injection. Feeding that into a database, getting the results, and using the results to do a AI-generated visualization. Another key use case that's coming up, which is how do you translate the SQL and get the results back? Google released Duet AI, which is exactly this for their analytics system within Looker. And this seems to be another common use case that's popping up. Another key thing that we're doing that's different from everyone else is we're doing access controls for retrieval augmentation, which means this is great for one person, but what if I'm going to ask a question about, to HR about my address, but I should only get my address. I should not be able to retrieve data from anybody else. How do you actually propagate the access controls in? And so we're working on role-based access controls across data to make sure that when you ask an LLM questions and provide a context, it only returns context that you should be available to you. Translation, transcription, this is a big one. We've gone through the use cases there a few times, but translations are really, really impressive with these large language models. And so you're able to really take marketing copy, any type of localization content, and build high quality results. We've also been able to see that it's takes it a step further where you can actually transcribe the tone of your company and carry that voice over, which oftentimes does happen. A lot of companies, the way it sounds are different, which is why when you go abroad and you go to popular brands, they seem quite different. Like I think some of the fast food chains are extremely different across different places. They have different marketing and different types of voices. You can actually specify and carry the same tone you want from the US to other places, or you can derive a new type of perspective and voice for your company abroad or different locales and languages. Okay, modalities. So we only went into text, but there's a lot of different models coming out. So text is the one that's currently under most innovation because people see a lot of the business applications stepping there. For images, Mid-Journey, Stable Diffusion, video, Stable Diffusion. Audio is starting to take off. There's a lot of different audio models, from taking your voice and extracting text out of it, or taking text and creating voices out of it. And then there are different coding models. We won't go into this exercise, and this is more of a fun exercise, but we will put the link in the chat. But we support different types of models. And so for this example here, we have GPT-4 to generate my Stable Diffusion prompt. I can create the Stable Diffusion prompt following this theme that I set up, which was crime detective noir. And then based off of that, I can use it to generate me a sentence, like, kind of like a Batman movie, what would they say? And then I can actually use Bark to take that text and generate voice out of it. And so it's a fun activity. Feel free to do it in your free time, where you're able to go from voice models to text models to image models. We also have Hugging Face support. And so if you're looking at some of the Hugging Face models and what's there, then you can also use that. Just a fun playground to try out different types of modalities. But maybe we can put the link. Oh, you're ahead of me. Perfect. Amazing. And then we're getting close to the end. I will leave 5 minutes at the end for Q&A. We do have a promo code for all AI Camp attendees. We've created a coupon where the growth tier gives you a lot more resources, and you can do a lot more consumption of these generative AI models. Typically, we charge $50 per month on it. But for the attendees here, we're giving it for $1 for the first month. We have 250 of these coupons. And so for the first 250 folks, you'll be able to get, for just $1, a ton of resources to use for generating these generative AI content. And the promo code is below, which is AICamp23. Make sure you screenshot it, make sure to leverage it, and this will save you, $49 if you're looking to use it heavily within the first month. Amazing. Quick plug for us. We're launching on Product Hunt tomorrow. It's a big day for us. We're kind of actively showing what we have, and we want the world to know. And so if you have a Product Hunt account, please upvote us tomorrow. That would mean a lot for us. We'd want to be the #1 product on Product Hunt. For people who haven't seen Product Hunt is a website where people have been showcasing massive product launches. And it gets a lot of visibility, and it's a great way to show incredible products. And we'd love to be, one of the best ones shown there tomorrow. And so if you have an account, please go out and support us there. And yeah, time for discussion. I went super over and I rushed a bit towards the end. I feel very guilty, but yeah, open questions, 5 minutes. I can also stay a little bit over. Yeah. Let me open the comment section.
So far, no questions, just their promo code sharing.
Okay, amazing. If there are no questions, I can rattle off about semantic retrieval or talk about anything. Yeah.
Eric is interested in knowledge graphs.
Amazing. Okay. Let us do it, Eric. Let me put the promo code up. Just another quick, make sure you screenshot it. Oh, it's already in the comments. Amazing. Let me go to semantics. So yes, so knowledge graphs have become popular now more than ever, because Let me go to semantic retrieval actually. So knowledge graphs has become more popular than ever because what people are finding out is as you inject more context into these large language models, it struggles to determine the nuances. And so how do you provide it higher quality data that's more relevant to the responses you want? And Eric, you're probably really familiar with this, but knowledge graphs have been there for a long time, and they were all about getting the right context, traversing relationships modeled as a graph, all the edges, finding closest to your neighbors, finding Euclidean distance in like a vector graph to figure out like what is the closest proximity to what I'm trying to retrieve, and the relationships, if it's marked out as a graph and the edges, you can actually retrieve associated content, and that feeds into the overall LLM because that's the additional context it needs to give you responses that are even more appropriate with additional context allowed. And so knowledge graphs in combination with these large language models are really powerful, which is also why you see Google making a huge investment, Bing making a good investment, because all of those are based off of, historical knowledge graphs and all of their search algorithms. And now they're using a lot more of these LLMs to get you the associated content. They upload a compressed ontology into the LLM that you, okay. So this is also interesting. So there is another technique out there that's coming out, which is how do you embed context directly into some type of format? So what Eric, I think what you're talking about is the compressed ontology into the LLM. I've also seen this technique called soft prompt tuning, where you're actually taking an embedding and generating the embedding into like an 8 megabyte file and actually putting it into the model. These techniques are quite strong. I'm actually quite bullish on these because overall, natural language and text seems like there's still some information loss, while being able to put the ontology directly in or the embedding directly into the model will have very little context loss. And so I'm actually really hopeful for a lot of this technology because currently with RAG style approach, which I'm showing here, it provides the context in as text form, but the innovation to actually give it in other types of data formats is really, really powerful. And so we're actually really looking for that. And we're keeping a close eye on the different papers that are coming out because I think that's a really innovative field. Yeah, amazing. We're really up to date with all these things. Amazing. Cool. Other questions?
I have about a minute left and you will be sending this out with
Yes.
other links.
I'll make a whole collage of links. Bear with me. I'll send a bunch of links out. A lot of the content here, the different workbooks for people who try, some example ones. We can probably put a list of the amazing presentations and docs that people have given in the chat, like the papers. Love it. I love how interactive this section was. And thank you so much. I know the time is also probably inconvenience for some folks because this is so global, but this was absolutely phenomenal. And I hope to stay in touch. Yeah, I would love to stay in touch with all the folks. Actually, yeah, let me just, if people are interested in at least talking more, I'm always there. Feel free to reach out to me, my email, connecting with LinkedIn. Yeah. Happy to continue the conversation because I think it's all a net new field. And so learning more is incredible for me. And I love kind of all the participation and all the insights I've been getting. Amazing. And if that's it, then yeah, I think we wrap up and yeah, looking forward to continuing the discussion with everyone. Amazing. Thank you for bearing with me for 2 hours. This is, I know a 2-hour session is long, especially with the age of short form content now, but it's pretty incredible. Thank you so much, everyone.
If there are any more questions for Andrew, please feel free to ask. If not, I think we are good for today's session. Thank you so much, Andrew and Elaine, for that wonderful workshop today. We learned a whole lot of concepts about the AI workflows. I'm sure the audience had a very nice time too.
Amazing. No, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Always great. It's always great talking with people who are actively thinking about this. And I think I've learned probably as much, if not more, than what everyone else has learned. And so I'm really thankful for this. Thank you.